Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Kilayim, chapter 5, Halacha 7. We're in the Bet Midrash today in the Kollel. So the background noise are the holy tzaddikim who are learning live, and you get to hear the background noise. So it's like we're sitting in the Kollel today. Anyway, this Mishnah is getting with the problems and other issues of Kilayim, something that didn't come up. What about weeds? Are weeds going to be counted in Kilayim? What about other types of species of plants? Well, we're going to be getting into that. So the general rule that's going to be coming up in this Mishnah is that things that are normally grown for food, that's going to be the issue with Kilayim. Now, there's a Gemara in the Yerushalmi in Baba Batra that it says that somebody was planting crocuses next to the vineyard, and they ruled it Kilayim. Why crocuses? Because crocuses are the source for the saffron. So you want saffron, you have to grow crocuses. So you're not growing them for the flowers, you're growing them for the food. Well, we're going to get into other sorts of flowers and issues today. So the Mishnah starts off and it says somebody who maintains thistles. Now, that is not a plant that is normally grown. And the Mishnah says that in a vineyard, it's Rabbi Lazer, he says that he renders the vineyard and the thistles forbidden for benefit. But the sages say nothing renders a vineyard forbidden except for a species that is commonly maintained. That is the key idea. Is this being commonly maintained or not? Now, in Arabia, they are, and this we learned in Kilayim chapter 1, Halacha 1, they are growing thistles to feed the doves. But that's not a normal usage. Now, Rabbi Lazar is going to say that if they're using it for any area, in a normal way in any area, that it's going to count. But the sages say that, no, it would only count in the area that it is in. So the sages would say that that will count only in Arabia, but not here in Eretz Yisrael. Now, the deeper idea here is, well, people might walk by and say, well, how far are we going to take this prohibition on vineyards? Are we going to include the weeds? And that's really the idea. The idea is that, you might have these dandelions growing there, or species of like prickly lettuce, which are, not commonly maintained, not commonly grown. Well, those are going to be weeds, and those are not going to invalidate your vineyard. But if you do have other types of products that are growing there that can be used as food and are commonly maintained for food, that's going to be where your issue comes. So, like the crocuses, well, your crocuses are not being grown for flowers in this day. They're being grown because saffron is very expensive and it's very desirable and it's a food. So that's going to be really the key idea. Is this being maintained or not? And if it's commonly maintained, then it's going to prohibit not only the vegetable that's there, but it's also going to prohibit the vines as well. Now, grains and other plants where the seeds are eaten, like legumes, these are going to be considered Kilayim in a vineyard, that you already know. But what about plants where the seeds are not eaten? Now, that's going to be where the rest of this Mishnah and Gemara goes. What about where the seeds are not eaten? Well, this gets divided into two categories, and the Mishnah is going to divide it up into Minei Yerakot and Minei Zerayim. Now, regarding this, the Rambam in Kilayim 1.8 was going to say that Minei Yerakot are going to be the types of vegetables that are normally planted in small patches, and Minei Zerayim are going to be those that are normally planted in large fields. And you can find a list from him about these sorts of vegetables, of which would be which. And the Chazan Ish is explaining that although it might not be easy to discern intrinsic differences between exactly what is going to be Minei Zerayim and Minei Yerakot, he's saying that if the rabbis distinguished between them, then there is a difference between them. So this intrinsic difference might be why there's going to be different laws with regards to Kilayim coming up. So the Mishnah states the status of Minei Zerayim with regard to Kilayim. And again, as the Rambam is describing this in his commentary, he's saying that Minei Zerayim is going to be those normally planted in a large field. So what's normally planted in a large field? Well, that's what we're going to have here. The Mishnah says it's the iris, the ivy, the white lily plants, and all other types of Zerayim are not Kilayim in a vineyard. Now, regarding this, we might try to figure out, well, what exactly are these plants? One of these plants might actually just be the artichoke, which can live many years. And why is that an issue? Well, you might say that that's kind of like a tree. Is this going to be a tree or is this going to be a vegetable? Because this fruit can stay on there for many, many years. And we're going to get into that later. Now, the other issue that's going to be here is going to be, again, what's the exact identity of these plants? And, sometimes the plants that are going to be coming up and described in Chapter 5, Halacha 7, a lot of the Meforshim say we're not sure what the identity is. So, like, for example, in the iris plant that's being described here, that might be the type of plant that is like the flower that you're familiar with, but the Rambam is saying that that's actually going to be mint. So some are going to be saying it's one thing, and the others are going to be saying it's another. And they're all saying that these are not Kilayim in a vineyard. Now, if you're going to read it like that, you would say, well, iris is not because if you're growing it for flowers, right? And then you would say, like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense because, there's not a food for iris. You don't eat irises. But if it's going to be mint, that's going to be a big hiddush, and because mint is used for food. So the Mishnah moves on to the next part, and it's going to discuss several plants. And I thought this was brilliant that Rebbe puts this in here concerning hemp. Rabbi Tarfon says it is not Kilayim in a vineyard. The sages say that hemp is Kilayim in a vineyard. Why is this so smart, so brilliant, such a necessity? Well, hemp, which is going to be cannabis, it is something that is grown for the tough fibers. They used to make ropes out of hemp, and they found that for ships, if you had hemp ropes, that the ropes didn't rot very quickly. They were very resistant, and they're very tough and durable. In fact, the best ropes in the world, up until modern fibers, was going to be a hemp rope, certainly for sea travel. Now, the hemp plant also had edible seeds, but primarily, you're not growing it for food production. You're primarily growing it for wool production, right? So really, the idea is that, Rosh Cerilios are going to explain that Rabbi Tarfon, in this case, is excluding hemp because it's not primarily used for food, but for the fiber, and it's woven together with wool. So the idea is that hemp is going to be very similar to linen, but the idea is that it has to be pointed out in the Mishnah because it was commonly used in the old days. And, it's unlike linen because it is permitted to be mixed with wool. Now, we know that linen and wool is a problem. That's shatnez. But why is this put in here? Well, because if you mix hemp fiber and wool, did you make shatnez? No, you did not make shatnez. And likewise, the sages are saying that while hemp, is also going to be cultivated for the edible portion, they're saying that it can be considered Kilayim in a vineyard. So that's a big hiddush. So the idea is that the sages are saying, look, that's very nice that you're growing it for the ropes and the fiber, and it's very nice that you spin these things together with wool, and that garment is not going to be Kilayim. But according to the sages' point of view, they're saying, look, the seeds were edible, and they were commonly edible, and very nice that you're primarily using the main part of the plant for the fiber, but because the seeds are also used for food, that's going to be the idea of what is going to make it, according to the sages, regard to Kilayim in the vineyard. And I thought this was very smart because, again, we've seen this before in Masechet Shvius where, you're taking a single plant and you're splitting up the plant into multiple parts and usages. And this is what effectively the argument for the sages is here as well. In other words, you're saying that very nice that the stalk is being used for rope, but you're taking the seeds and using that for a food product, and that's what's going to make it a problem. And again, it's going to be like the crocus. The crocus, you could say, well, primarily you're growing it for food. That's going to be, your saffron. But when you're done with your saffron, you can cut your crocuses and decorate your Shabbos table. It has a use. And over here, you're also saying that, it does have a food use as well. And it's a common food use. It's not like something that, if I don't use these seeds, who cares? No, apparently, according to the sages, it was commonly used enough that it's going to be regarded as a part of the plant that is commonly used enough where it's food, even though the main intent is not to grow it for food, it's to grow it for rope, but you still use part of the plant. And the other idea is the artichoke, and it says the artichoke is going to be Kilayim in the vineyard. That's the end of the Mishnah. But why the artichoke? Well, the artichoke is going to be, and this is teaching that the artichoke, says the Rambam, is classified as min yira. So you might have misclassified the artichoke. Why? Because it can live many times and it can appear like it's a tree, right? And so because this plant and the fruit of the plant, which is the artichoke, will live for many, many years, you would say, well, I know etrogs live for many years, and this is a very, very big bush. Maybe it's a small tree. And so the Mishnah is coming to teach you that no, artichokes not only are going to be food, but it's also going to be Kilayim. Now, this is also important because fruit from trees and proper trees are not going to be Kilayim with vineyards. So why do we care about trying to figure out these sort of in-between plants like what's going to be coming up with the caper bush or over here with the artichoke? Are we going to put this in a classification of Minei Zerayim or also Minei Yerakot? Or are we going to be saying that these are actually like proper trees and eitzim? And we're going to say like, well, this is not Kilayim at all because, when we're taking like a fig tree or something like that, well, that's not going to be Kilayim with a vineyard. Now, vineyards are in its own category because vineyards are the only vine that's going to be a tree, but, we're talking about the vineyard, which you can't make a vineyard Kilayim with itself. But over here, if the artichoke is going to be classified as Minei Yerakot, then it is going to be Kilayim because it is going to be something that is going to be growing in these small patches for like a vegetable. And if it's going to be a tree, then you would not have to worry about it at all. That's why this is in the Mishnah. That's why this Mishnah is very clever because it's creating a classification system. Now, I want to point out that the Chazan Ish talks about that, today we have the Linnaean system, which is, like if you go to college, they'll teach you with all the Latin words for how they're organizing things. But the sages had a different way of organizing things, and you can learn more about the contrast between the Gemara's way and Chazal's way to classify things, and also with what the Linnaean system is in the introduction of the book of the Chazan Ish's Kilayim. It's a great book. The Gemara is going to say like this, and it's going to try to explain Rabbi Lazar the Tana's ruling in our Mishnah. And the Gemara says that Rabbi Abahu says that Rabbi Lazar's reason for ruling that thistles are subject to Kalei Karam is that in Arabia they maintain thistles for the camels. And I actually made a mistake earlier in this year. I said it was for doves, and actually there was another plant called darnel that was used for doves. But in Arabia, they were maintaining the thistles for camels. Anyway, both Rabbi Lazar and the sages are going to agree that not only a species maintained as food for humans, but also a species maintained just as animal food is going to be subject to Kalei Karam. But what they're going to be disagreeing about is like this, okay? The disagreement is that if a species is maintained only in one area, then it's going to be considered that, like seed that you sow in all areas. That's going to be the position of Rabbi Lazar. And he's basically going to be saying that a species is going to be subject everywhere as Kilayim if it's subject to if they're growing it normally even in just one place. But the sages disagree, and they're holding that only in the region where they're maintained, that would be over here in Arabia, is it going to be where a species is going to be considered the seed that you sow. And outside that region, it's not going to be Kilayim. So only in a vineyard in Arabia would thistles be a problem, because over there, you're growing it for your camels. Now, very interesting that over there in Shvius, we're seeing that animal food and human food can have Shvius sanctity. And over here, we're also seeing there's no argument that over for Kilayim issues, that both human food and animal food can also be a Kilayim issue. And there's no disagreement on that. They both agree. The sages and Rabbi Lazar both agree. Now, the Mishnah stated the following plants, that the iris, the kisos, and the shohanas, hamelach, are not Kilayim in a vineyard. And the Gemara is going to try to identify the species, and many times in the Gemara, in the Yerushalmi, it will bring in Greek, and so Greek comes up here. And it says that the iris is the arisia, which is going to be like the iris, and it's using arisia, which is the Greek word for iris. And there's, again, the Rambam is saying that the iris is actually going to be mint. So there's also another, the Aruch is saying that it's a type of hedge mustard, which is used in cooking but not actually related to mustard. So there's some fogginess about exactly which plant this is. And also, like with the artichoke, there's going to be a little bit of fogginess on exactly which type of plant this is. But I assume that it's going to be the artichoke that's grown on layers, where it has layers on layers on layers, but it might be something else. But let's just say it's going to be the one growing on layers that's commonly known as artichoke. But then it gets to the next one, the kisos, the kisosa, that's going to be ivory. And over here, the Rambam is going to say that it's field blindweed, and that it's going to be a climbing plant. And they're all describing this as a climbing plant. And the next one is going to be the Shoshanas Hamelach, and they say that it's the Crinton and white lily, and they say that it's going to be the six-petaled lily, which has the Latin term Lineum candidum, and the Rambam is going to actually identify this as a totally different plant. They're going to say that it's a type of anemone, like some kind of sea coral, that actually is going to be alluded to later on in the shir. The Rosh actually says that it's a rose, but actually disregards that later on in his identification. But as you can see, there's a little bit of cloudiness in exactly which is which. Now, the next part is going to talk about these next sets of species that are Kilayim. And it says the reeds, the higai bushes, the rose bushes, and the atad bushes are tree species and are not Kilayim in a vineyard. So what's going to be with that? Well, we know that trees themselves are not related to a prohibition of Kilayim, and they're also not related to any prohibition for Kilei Zerayim. So only, mixing something with grafting is going to be a problem with trees. That's going to be the issue with trees. And what this is trying to say is they're trying to say, look, if you put a rose bush, the rose bush is going to have the halachic status of being a tree. That's the commentary by the Rambam. The Rambam is going to say this is a type of rose bush, and there's a few other types of rose bushes that's described in Masechet Shvius in chapter 7, Halacha 6, where we talked about roses. And anyway, the same term is coming up over here. And then you'd say, well, what about types of reeds? Why are we caring about reeds? Well, there's a commentary in the Gemara in Bavli Eruvin 34a, and it's talking about different types of reeds. Some of the reeds can be hard, some can be soft. We know, like bamboo, and this is the opinion of the Rashi, that you can have the same plant that in the beginning will be soft and actually edible. The shoots are edible on bamboo, and later on the plant gets to be very, very hard, and so hard that you can actually use the bamboo as regular wood for making things. So the same plant can actually go through many stages. It's not necessarily a different species of plant. Some of the commentators are saying that this is a different type of species of plant. Some are saying that it's the same kind of species of plant. That's going to be the Rashi opinion, is that, why would this be possibly Kilayim? Well, if this is going to be in the soft stage and used for shoots and edible, well, we saw earlier that they can take the shoots of things and they can pickle them. We saw that in Masechet Shvius. They'll put vinegar with things and pickle the shoots for food. But over here, we're seeing that, well, if you have these shoots, they could be in a status of that position of time where they're Kilayim, and later on, if they were actually harder, maybe they would not be Kilayim. This gets into another debate. If it's going to be like what Rashi is saying, can something that was Kilayim turn into something that is not Kilayim later? That's a maloket. But anyway, over here, the basic idea is that if these are going to be trees, we're seeing that trees themselves are not going to be Kilayim in a vineyard. And this is really going through a whole list of different kinds of species that we haven't talked about. We've only been talking about barley, and we talk about vines of melons and legumes, and we've been talking about wheat, but we haven't been talking about what about a tree yet. Now, it lists more. The Gemara says papyrus, sedge, rush, and all other species that grow in marshes. And this is going to be hard to get your head around. It says that they are species of herbage and they are Kilayim in a vineyard. And the problem in this Mishnah is that it says va'ein Kilayim bekerem, but there's no vowels in it. So it could also be read as va'ain Kilayim bekenyan, bekerem. And so the problem there is, depending on the vowelization with this word ve'ein or va'ain, it could be that it isn't Kilayim, or you vowelize it meaning that it is Kilayim. So the Rosh Cirilio is reading this text and saying that these species are not Kilayim in a vineyard because they're cultivated for making baskets or boxes from the stalks, and they're not used as food. And that's how he's reading it. He's saying that these species of herbage can be planted in a vineyard. But others are saying that these are going to be Minei Yerakot, and they're going to be saying that this actually, like the Marafulda and the Pnei Moshe, and also the Vilna Goan, is going to be saying that this is going to be Kilayim in a vineyard. So it's hard to understand this because the Gemara is unclear, and it's hard to understand because there's no Nikudot, so we don't know. And the Gemara now is going to quote another Baraisa that seems to be contradictory. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Hoshaya taught a Baraisa that these are species of herbage. It says the artichoke, the mallow, and the demoa. The commentators, by the way, including Rosh Cirilio, writes that they don't know the identity of the mallow plant or the demoa plant. Rambam is saying that this plant is going to be unknown, and there are some people who do try to make a commentation on like what the plant could be, but a lot of the commentators don't know what it is. And again, the idea of the artichoke is that it's something that might be growing on something that might be a tree, or it might just be a species of herbage, and it grows in layers, and it can persist for many years. Now, the Gemara is going to try to explain this. Well, let me try to explain this, and then we'll look at this contradiction. So there's a Baraisa which says that the atad plant is a species of herbage, and that seems to be a problem because we have in this list the artichoke, the mallow, the demoa, and the atad. And again, the Rambam, by the way, on the atad is saying that it's a type of bush that has edible seeds. So are we putting this in the category like the artichoke, which is that maybe this is a type of tree? Or are we going to say that, maybe this is just a type of vegetable? And, maybe this is a type of tree that grows edible berries. So if it's going to be a type of bush that has edible berries, well, that's going to be a Kilayim issue. But if it's a type of tree, then it doesn't have any Kilayim issue at all. So the question is, are we going to say that this is a species of tree or not? That's the issue. So the Gemara is going to try to resolve it, and it's going to say that there's a baraisa that's going to classify the atad as herbage with regard to the laws of blessings, whereas here, in this baraisa, it's going to classify the atad as a tree species with regards to the laws of Kilayim. So there's two baraisas, and it looks contradictory, but it's not. And in one baraisa, it's going to be saying that when you're saying the blessing on these berries, that it's going to be Beur Minei Deshaim. That's the blessing that you say on that. Now, normally, if it's going to be like a bush, you'd say, like, from the fruit of the ground. And, Beur Pri Adama, right? You'd also say that for greens. So the question is, like, what's the status of the blessing of this? And can we use the status of the blessing to indicate whether this is going to be a tree or whether this is going to be a bush? And we're going to get another Gemara that's going to clarify it, and also, so it's going to give us an idea, right? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi says that this says in effect, although an etrog is a tree, and the fruit, you recite the blessings of Beur Pri Etz, but you can still say upon the dates, these are going to be the immature buds that are edible. At that point in the development, you're going to say the blessing of Beur Minei Deshaim. And why would that be? Well, your etrog plant, the deep point of Rabbi Yossi is the etrog plant is normally grown for the fruit, right? You have the Pri Hadar, and you can also make jam out of the fruit. But if you did eat the dates, you're not normally growing the etrog for the dates. You're growing it for the developed fruit. So you would have a different bracha on this tree. And so really, in the atad plant, it's going to be the same idea. You're growing it for some other use. You're not necessarily growing it for these berries. And so because you're not really growing it for the berries, it's going to have a different bracha because these are going to be like immature. And it's going to get to something else that's related. That's going to be the caperberry bush, the capers. And you can get capers today in the grocery store. They're little green things, and they're often cured in vinegar or salt. They're delicious with fish, and I eat them all the time with fish or chicken. They're delicious. So there's a big maloket between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel about whether it's going to be Kilayim in a vineyard. Also, do you do orla on it or not? Is this going to be like a bush, or is this going to be like a tree? Again, we have a suffix. Now, if you have a proper tree, like a fig tree, and you put it next to a vineyard, you don't have any problem. But what about these bushes where the fruits, like the caper, can be on there for a long time? It could be on for a couple of seasons. And also, we don't really know, is this going to be treated like a tree in the halacha and the classification? So, regarding the caper bush, Bet Shammai says that it is Kilayim when it's planted in a vineyard, but Bet Hillel says that it is not Kilayim when planted in a vineyard. So both Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai are going to agree that the caper bush is subject to orla. Now, there's a contradiction here with Bet Shammai. Can you detect the contradiction? Contradictions like this. This comes up, by the way, in Bavli Berachot 36a, that Bet Shammai, if they're classifying it as a bush, and, instead of like a tree, and they're going to say, well, it's B'nai Yerok, then why are you going to be saying that it's Kilayim? If you're going to say it's a tree, and it's orla and it's a tree, why do you say it? Why do you say that it's subject to Kilayim? And if you're going to say that it's a type of Yerok, then why are you going to subject it to Orla? So there's no contradiction at all with the opinion of Bet Hillel. Bet Hillel is going to agree and on the Orla part, and they're going to say that it's if you put the caper bush inside of the vineyard, that it's not going to be Kilayim. Why? Because he's saying it's like a tree. But the position of Bet Hillel, how do you get where it's a bush and it's a tree? Because now it has characteristics of both in the halacha. And that's the problem with Bet Shammai. And the Bavli is going to answer that Bet Shammai's position is that they're uncertain whether the caper is going to be a bush or it's going to be a tree. Are you going to classify it as like Minei Yerok or like Etzim, like a tree? And so they're going to rule stringently, and they're going to subject it to both rules. Why are they going to rule stringently? They're going to rule stringently because the rules of Kilayim are deraita. So if you have a case of doubt, you're going to rule stringently. So that's what they do. The answer is they're not sure which it is, and that's how you come up with this sort of in-between answer by Bet Shammai. The halacha is going to be by Bet Hillel, for which there's no contradiction at all. Now, we're looking at this dispute between the caper bush and the classification as whether it's going to be a tree or min Yerok. And the idea is going to be, well, what if you're not sure? Because we have this case of uncertainty. And what if you have other plants that you're not sure about? What do you do? And that's the idea of this. So Rabbi Hanina Bar Papa taught a brisa that a plant that grows with branches or leaves from its stem or trunk is always a species of tree. And if it grew leaves directly from the roots, it's a species of Yerok. And the Gemara is going to say, and they asked, and they said, consider the cabbage plant. The leaves are going to grow from the stem. And certainly everybody agrees that it's going to be Minei Yerok. Now, by the way, the question is going to be about, what about the Carl plant? Carl, are you going to say that's a type of tree or it's a type of bush? And the halacha is going to be that it's going to be considered a type of tree. So you're going to say that it's going to have these branches that are going to grow from the stem. It's going to be more like the tree and less like the cabbage. So the Gemara is going to answer, what about the cabbage? And it's going to say here you're dealing with certainty. In other words, the cabbage, everybody would agree is Minei Yerok, and it's just a known fact. So normally what this brisa is talking about, they're saying, look, if you're having plants where the greens are coming out of the roots, that's going to be classified as Minei Yerok. And, it's certainly in the case of the cabbage, even though that the leaves are going to come out of the stalk instead of the roots, everybody knows that this is going to be a type of vegetable. It's not going to be classified as a type of tree. And here, Rabbi Hanina Bar Papa is dealing with a case of doubt. In other words, the Gemara ends this chapter and says, only where you're uncertain about a type of plant, whether it's going to be a tree or a Minei Yerok, that you use this criterion to try to determine the status. So, again, when we're looking at the laws of Kilayim, we have to understand that in the background context as the Chazan Ish, that we have to think about the laws of Kilayim as looking at Hashem's mastery over running the universe. In other words, things are created according to its kind, and you're not supposed to mix things, not even with different things within the field. Have a great day.